Graduates, dean, faculty, staff, parents, family, everyone who is here, because as you already saw, they love one of these graduates, savor the day. Life accumulates for individuals and for us collectively. I often tell the story of a man going into a bar, ordering 3 drinks, putting them down, 1, 2, 3. The bartender's surprised and he says, "You seem to be in an awfully big hurry." And the man says sadly, "You'd be in a big hurry too if you had what I have." And the bartender turns protective and he says, "I'm sorry, sir, what is it you have?" And the man says, 50 cents. You'd be in a hurry also if you had just minutes to tell this group of people that you're now part of the flow of public health history and that you're going to increase that flow beyond anything the people on the stage can imagine. You will use tools and knowledge and experience that we never had. And you will leave this part of your school with science that we did not have. But you were preceded by 100 billion people, and you will leave with the same values that we had, because these 100 billion people left some very important messages. Hear the almost unbearable perfection of Confucius talking about the Golden Rule, or Amos the prophet introducing the concept of social conscience. Think of Roger Bacon, who said science has no moral compass, therefore scientists have to develop a moral compass. Or think of Rabelais, who in 10 words described what we should have on the inside of every science building. Science without conscience is but the ruin of the soul. Or Albert Schweitzer, who reminds us that while ethics used to deal with the way people interacted, now it has to include animals and plants and the environment. And here Einstein, who said it's not enough that you should understand science. Concern for people should always be your ultimate goal. And the quotation I've used most often from Einstein is when he said, "Nationalism is an infantile disease." He said it's the measles of mankind. And finally, Richard Feynman, the physicist, who said, "Certainty is the Achilles heel of science and of religion and of politics." And you will in turn become the ancestors of people who hundreds of years in the future will benefit because you lived and they won't know to thank you. It may sound depressing if I tell you you're not going to become rich, you're not going to be lauded, and you probably won't even be thanked. But those people hundreds of years from now will have to know someone kept them from getting lung cancer or measles or environmental problems. I often think that public health sounds like a Jewish proverb: do good, but don't get caught. Even public health people forget the names of people like Pearl Hendricks. Pearl was working in Michigan in the 1930s and developed pertussis vaccine. Millions of people, many of us in this room, did not have pertussis, and many of us are alive because of that, and yet she was never lauded. And yet she seemed to be so thoroughly convinced she'd done the right thing, she did not want praise. So we build on the past and many things that have happened. About 90 years ago, the Rockefeller Foundation decided that they would increase research at the American University of Beirut. And they hired a young man by the name of Ed Turner. He went to Beirut. He became so successful that when he returned in 1936, the Rockefeller Foundation wanted to be sure no one else hired him away. And they sent someone to the pier to meet him as he got off the ship. And they offered him a position to be head of medicine at Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee. He did that, and within 2 years, because this man was so incredibly good, he became president of Meharry. He was president for 8 years, and he was offered 4 deanships of medical schools. He turned all of them down except one. It was too good to turn down. September 1945, he came to Seattle, and the University of Washington offered him a free hand in starting a medical school. 3 years later, he had built that first medical building. Some of you don't know, that's on an old golf course on Lower Campus. And he took over a few holes of that golf course for that first building, and eventually the entire golf course. And that takes some political savvy to take a golf course, and built this medical center, and that is part of why you are here. Another person who turns out to be very important was a man by the name of Alfred Strauss. He was born in Germany. His parents came to the state of Washington. He grew up in a place called Colville, north of Spokane. He was a football star at the University of Washington, graduated in 1905, went to the Midwest, became a doctor, and if you've read the book, Boys in the Boat, you will recall the crew members, 1936, going to Berlin and winning the gold medal, but they stopped in Chicago and they were hosted by Dr. Strauss. And we have a lectureship here at the University of Washington every year in Strauss's name. The history, the stories within stories that you may not know. One of the foundation stones of public health and global health, of course, vaccines. The modern public health era started 220 years ago when Edward Jenner in 1796 took material from the hand of a milkmaid who had cowpox, inserted it into the arm of James Phipps, and then weeks later tried to give him smallpox. Unsuccessful in giving him smallpox. This was the first vaccination. And we went from that then to Louis Pasteur in France, Jonas Salk in this country. And in April 1955, the University of Michigan had a press conference, and Tommy Francis, who was a teacher there and a mentor of Jonas Salk, had just finished a field trial on polio vaccine. He went to the lectern and he announced in 4 words what he was going to talk about. He said, safe, potent, and effective. And that was the beginning of the true modern vaccine age in this country. But within weeks, it was discovered that one of the manufacturers, Cutter, had left live virus in the vaccine. Hundreds of children became sick with polio paralysis because of that vaccine. Seattle-King County was to receive that vaccine from Cutter, and the night before it was due to come here, they got a call that it was being diverted to another state. And Seattle did not have that awful chapter in polio. But believe it or not, the man who was head of epidemiology in Seattle at that time, 1955, was also on the staff at the University of Washington teaching epidemiology. His name is Ray Ravenhold. He's still alive, and we just had lunch with him this noon. Stories within stories. I was asked to go to the University of Michigan on the 50th anniversary, and on the same day, 50 years ago, to talk from the same lectern and to describe what had happened in 50 years with polio. In order to reward me, they said I could send $50,000 to any project that I wanted. And I decided that Salk and Sabin and others were getting plenty of attention, but Tommy Francis, who had done this field trial on 1.8 million children, with hundreds of thousands of volunteers in the medical profession, education, parents, before computers, in less than 2 years, I decided he needed some recognition, and so I asked that the $50,000 be sent to this school to start a fund for students. And what happened? The Marguerite Casey Foundation matched that 3-to-1. The Hilton Foundation matched it 3-to-1. The Gates Foundation matched it 3-to-1. The University of Washington matched it, and it's now $1 million project. And some of you in the audience have actually had Tommy Francis scholarships this year. Stories within stories. Another story that I like to tell is of the teacher having children drawing pictures, and she went around the room to see what they were drawing. She stopped at the desk of one girl and asked, "What are you drawing?" She said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "You know, no one knows what God looks like." And the little girl said, "They will in a minute, because I'm going to show them." Well, we don't know what society will look like with better public health, but you're going to show us. And that's why it makes me very happy to see this group of people. In the annual Gates letter, Melinda Gates was asked, if you had one wish, what would it be? And she said, more time. You are having your time increase, your life expectancy increase 6 hours a day. Now that's pretty spectacular. But what you can do with each hour or each day or each month, that is functional life expectancy, is increasing even faster. An example, in the last year, you have been exposed to as much knowledge as Aristotle was in his lifetime. So in terms of knowledge exposure, you're living hundreds of years as compared to Aristotle. Some of you will have as many experiences with other cultures in a year as Marco Polo did in a lifetime. And think of what Shakespeare could have done with a word processor. He didn't run out of ideas. He was using a quill. Think of what he could have done. So you're going to pack literally hundreds and even thousands of years of functional life expectancy into 80 calendar years. A month ago, I gave the commencement address at Emory University, and the entire talk was on lessons I wish I could learn. And I'm going to end with just a few of those lessons, not many of them. But one of them, Harlan Cleveland, was a political scientist, and late in life, he became interested in public health and global health. And he said the fuel of public health is unwarranted optimism. He said that's what keeps people going, unwarranted optimism. Number 2, life plan. My grandfather was born during the Civil War over 150 years ago, and the day he was born, everyone who knew the family knew his life plan. He would be a farmer like his father and grandfather before him. And then things changed, and when I was your age, people were telling me, develop a life plan. My advice to you today is do not develop a life plan. You can't possibly know what options will open up to you. You can't possibly know the inventions. And so instead, spend your time developing a life philosophy. And then you will have tools to make decisions at every fork in the road. Number 3, continue the pursuit of equity. No public health problem is as large as the problem of poverty. And we need public health people making this case to the world that poverty is the basic problem that the world faces, and that it's totally unfair because everyone in this room is subsidized by people working at low wages. So we get our food and our clothes and our entertainment and our travel cheaper because there are people working at very low wages, which means we have now become the plantation owners. And we should be absolutely embarrassed by that. So use your public health training, no matter what you end up doing, to try to reduce the plague of poverty. Civilization is finally defined by how we treat each other, and civilization is organized kindness. It's organized compassion, and that's the purpose of public health. Number 4, the best decisions you will make will be based on the best science, but the best results will be based on the best management, science and management. Number 5, your graduation already tells something about your philosophy. Don't succumb to the idea of making money. If that becomes your target, you'll probably make money, and you'll reach a point of wondering why. Anne Dickinson said, "Life is like a coin. You can spend it any way you want, but you can only spend it once. And so be sure you spend your life coin well." 6, in the book Cutting for Stone, there's a passage that just stands out that says, "Home is not where you are from. Home is where you are needed." And so I'm hoping you all find your way home. And finally, at the time I was born, there was a journalist by the name of Lincoln Steffens, and he wrote the following: "The greatest song has not been sung. The greatest poem has not been written. The greatest story has not been told." And I add, the most important public health results are still in our future, and they will depend on you. Thank you very much.